everybody. Welcome to episode 63 of the Alexei and Talal podcast. Well, this is at least a half Syria special, I suppose, because we are in the second week of the new regime in Syria.
We're a half Syrian podcast.
We are a half Syrian podcast, and we both had our own run-ins with the Assad regime. So first of all, your dad was actually imprisoned by was it the Assad or was
no,
it
No, it was pre-Assad.
The Ba'ath Party. I don't really know much about the pre-Assad. I don't really know a huge amount about Syrian history, but it was a Ba'athist party, wasn't it? And your dad was actually, initially was in. Well, tell us about it. He was imprisoned and tortured by somebody.
I may have told this on the podcast before, but it doesn't matter. And I'm no expert. All I've got is personal connection and personal story to tell. But I think there was Syria was ruled by French colonial empire.
Yeah, well, it was,
and then there was the revolution, which
first let's go back. There was the Ottoman Empire. Then the Ottomans were on the wrong side in the First World War, and then the victors were obviously the Allies, and there was an agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which divided up the Middle East between the French and the British, basically. Uh-huh. French got Syria and Lebanon, and we got Iraq.
Yeah.
By we, I mean Britain gave itself Iraq. I mean, these are all obviously breaking solemn promises that have been made to the Arabs. And also that you got the Balfour Declaration, I think, a little later.
Which is why in Lebanon, not as much as like Morocco or Algeria at all, but in Lebanon they are quite they really embrace that European culture, and a lot of them speak French, pretend to be French or Italian, or like act like they are.
Yeah.
And Syria got a little bit of that. Culturally, and Syria's always been a secular country. So although there is a heavier Muslim population, it's never been part of the law, such as in countries like Saudi or Iran. It's never been enforced. You could go to a bar and get a drink in Syria. And there are large Christian communities still to this day in Syria. In fact, since... because people are trying to make out like what's happened recently has been like this big Islamist movement. But there are Kurdish towns in Syria with Christian communities, and they've been putting up their Christmas trees and in their traditions without any infringement. It's always been a secular place, but of course Islamists,
whether that remains the
still
case,
run around and do their thing. Where was I going? There's always been like a French influence in that area. Never happened in Iraq, though. Full English in Iraq is just killing 1 million of their people, is what they call a full English invasion. But then there was a Syrian revolution kicking the French out, and that led to this Ba'athist.
The Ba'athist Party was initially a kind of ideology that thought there would be a kind of unified Arab state across Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, I think. I don't know.
Sure, I don't know either, so I'm not going to pretend I know too much about what they stood on and all that, but I do know that when my dad was a teenager, I'm getting phone interference, put that on airplane mode. When my dad was a teenager, he broke into his school with loads of shoe polish and wrote some slogans on the wall, some graffiti on the walls of his school against the Ba'athist Party.
Right.
Who he got arrested as he was leaving. I think someone snitched on him. And he was held in prison. They would beat him. They would on a daily basis, crack a cane on his feet, on the soles of his feet and stuff. And that's always the way of torturing in Syria. It's like they know you're not part of some bigger movement, and they know you've not got anything to confess, but they just go through the fucking ritual of it.
Yeah.
They'd sit him in a cell. My dad said the worst torture was they'd sit in a cell and they'd have just a dripping pipe
Oh,
above
like
his
the
head.
Chinese water torture, yeah.
And it's just a drop of water, bloop, 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 on his head. And he'd be tied up so he couldn't move. But my dad did also have my dad loved playing handball, and he even was part of the Olympic team in 1966. I think they went to Naples or Rome.
Rome.
And Dad never got off the bench, but he did get a participation medal,
Wow.
which his brother then later gambled away in a poker game.
And was it because of his imprisonment?
And he was in prison. He started a handball team with the prisoners, like murderers and rapists and fucking, psychopaths. They made a handball team and they played against the prison guards in the prison, which is brilliant.
Is this how did he come to Britain?
He did end up getting kicked out, forced to leave the country, went to Lebanon, worked as a teacher, got a job as a journalist, and that led on to him becoming a correspondent in the UK to this Lebanese paper. And that's how he ended up in the UK, joined the Foreign Press Association, became president of the Foreign Press Association for 2 terms, and we met Clive Anderson. Fucking talking of Iraq, Tony Blair and Cunty genocide face prepped their campaign in the Foreign Press Association. They hired a room in the Foreign Press Association. Really? While my dad was there. It was like, must have been 96. And they used a room in their building. And so my dad would let them in every day and meet them. And they were prepping their campaign. So, my dad, unfortunately, had a small part to play in helping Blair and the father of a shit comedian become rulers of the new world. Actually, and Brown was with them. I've always had a soft spot for Gordon Brown.
Really?
I guess because he's just such... In high school politics, they taught us that he was such a victim of Tony Blair's backstabbing betrayal, because he was meant to get the second term, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then Tony Blair held on.
Yeah, I think he's, I've got no love for Brown. I think he was as bad as the rest of them, really, or nearly as bad. Anyway, this Syrian...
So Syria
caught
then...
us on the hop.
Well, so after a while, so for the last 44 years, I think, the Assad family had an iron grip on Syria. They've been straight up dictators. And before Bashar, it was his dad, Hafiz.
Yes.
Assad means lion. Hafiz al-Assad means holder of the lion.
Okay.
And it's fucked. So I've had family members disappear because they were out in a cafe or a bar and mouthing off, said the wrong thing, too loud. And one day when they're walking in the street, they disappear and they're never seen again. People would have accidents a lot.
Yeah.
There was a famous, I think he's still alive, a satirical cartoonist who was snatched, put in the back of a Jeep, driven around, roughed up, and they broke all his fingers and chucked him out the back of the Jeep in the middle of the street. That kind of shit was just normal.
Yeah.
And the Syrians were the victim of that. Yeah. And Syrian people are... You've been to Syria, you can't find a more welcoming, kinder, warmer people.
No.
Amazing cooks, people full of joy and love. Up until I was 18, I used to go every year on holiday to Syria to visit my family, and it was joyful, beautiful occasions. When they had this, we went one Ramadan, and my uncle had a lamb in his back garden, and my brother fell in love with this lamb, and they were best friends. And he was always playing with the lamb, and they named him, and he'd like go out and feed him and everything. And then Eid comes along, and they're all sitting around eating kebabs, and my brother's like, "Where's the lamb?" He's like, "You're holding him, mate." It was even worse. It was a big festivity. We strung him up and fucking killed the guy, and not my brother, the lamb. And my brother was like in pieces, but then one bite of the shawarma, I think he quickly forgot about his friend.
A familiar tale. In terms of, there's so much. I sort of feel daunted slightly by the enormity, really, and by our, I suppose only our partial knowledge. One thing that struck me was I've been consulting with my friends in the military about the equipment the rebels are using, and I've also been looking at various people on YouTube. There was I think a fragment of a Crispin Flintoff show, and he had, three people who I admire and generally agree with, which was Craig Murray, Dr. David Miller, and Richard Medhurst, who does Electronic Intifada, and they were talking about this was on Sunday, I think, and I only saw, I don't think I saw half part of the interview, and because, as they described it, Syria was the conduit for arms for the Palestinian resistance, then that pipeline is now from Iran. That pipeline has now been choked off, and they saw Israeli and US meddling in this, and of course Turkey as well. All of which is true. I think in the bits I saw, though, they didn't express any kind of criticism of the Assad regime, which, as you said, and as everybody can clearly see, and as I've experienced, was phenomenally brutal regime. And this sort of speaks, I think, to a perennial problem that we on the left have always had. And it always struck me, for instance, that my parents, because they believed that the Soviet Union was a better system than capitalism, they ignored, they ignored the Stalin show trials and the purges, and because it's been a perennial problem with those of us on the left that there's a tendency to ignore when my enemy's enemy is my friend, but more than that, you find yourself not criticizing somebody like the Assad regime because they played a pivotal part in Palestinian resistance, and I think it's a problem that, if the left ever wants to make progress, we have to address that. You have to be able to say that, yes, they were a conduit for arms to the resistance, but on the other hand, it was an extraordinarily brutal and repressive regime, as is the regime in Iran. And we can't ignore that fact. Really, we need to get over that kind of blindness. Really, I think
precisely. Yeah. If you look at who his best friends were, Putin and Iran, the Ayatollah, not the Ayatollah. Who's the leader of Iran? Well, it doesn't matter. Ayatollah. Iran and Putin, Bashar's best friends, and so he's not anyone to forgive. I'll never forgive the guy for killing my uncle and other members of my family. It's impossible to. Yeah. No matter what, and so anything good they do. It's like a mass murderer giving a $5 to a homeless guy. It's like, oh, what? So you're going to love this guy now? No, absolutely not.
Yes, and I'd say that is a perennial problem on left. The other question is also, we had that episode a few years ago with Karen Ross about Rojava in north of Syria, where this experiment was going on following the teachings of Abdullah Öcalan, that there was this state, where women had absolute equality, and the state was governed from the bottom up in a kind of system of anarchy in its true sense. Democracy. How true that was, and how true it is now, is hard to.
It's hard to know what's happening.
It's hard to know what's happening, and they are. I heard today that the Kurds seem to have given up Deir ez-Zor and the oil fields. There's some fucking next level shenanigans going on there, because also the the Kurds have, to a degree, certainly cooperated with the United States and have cooperated with, and presumably with Israel as well. And also, the other point is, of course, that all the prison camps for the ISIS fighters from all of Syria are in the Kurdish regions. And if Turkey wants to eradicate that, the Kurdish kind of enclave there, I'm sure one of the first things they would do if Turkey, if the HTC, or whatever they're called, HTC, if they attack the Kurds in the north, then one of the first things they'll do is let all those ISIS fighters free. I mean, that's where the jihadi bride, isn't it? Selma Begum she's up there in Kurdistan. So I don't know what all that means, really. So I don't know. I don't know whether the listeners know.
Well, okay, yeah. So you got the northeast of Syria. Well, if you want at home to follow along with what's going on in Syria minute by minute, there is a website called syria.liveuamap.com. syria.liveuamap.com. And it shows you a map of Syria, and it's kind of colored in. So there's a big yellow section in the northeast, and that is the SDF run section. That's the Kurdish
Syrian Democratic Forces.
Some people are saying they're funded by Turkey. Could that be possible?
It doesn't seem to me. Are they the Kurds?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem. I mean, you never know with this shit. Years ago, my friend Siobhan Redmond was in a brilliant play from the Scottish National Theatre called Dunsinane, which was about after Macbeth has been defeated by forces from England. She played the Lady Macbeth, and it was just about how the English are then trying to impose their kind of rule over Scotland. And it was all about how the tribal allegiances that Macbeth had kept, and the complex levels of kind of family and kind of clan allegiances. Now it was a parable, obviously, about the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. But maybe
no, I was wrong though. I was wrong. It's US backed.
Oh yes,
Syrian Democratic.
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing that's kept that. As well, Khan said, the only thing that kept that Rojava experiment alive was the fact that the US Special Forces were up there fighting ISIS, supposedly, and therefore the Turks wouldn't attack them because, they would be attacking the United States, really. But I sort of I got into this saying I thought, well, both of us, given our history, that we would, be able to say things, make statements about what was going on. But then I sort of, as soon as I started speaking, I realised how little.
Well, no, I did defunk that from the beginning. I said we're not I'm not. I spoke for myself, but I'm not an expert. But I do have a personal story to tell. There's this podcast I've been getting into recently. It's called The Animal Sense Maker. Each episode is 10 minutes long and focuses on one animal, and they're trying to tell the story and teach you about animals, basically.
Right.
But each episode is about literally one animal. So not one species of animal, but one actual creature. Like, for example, there was an episode on pangolins, but rather than bombard you with information about pangolins, they just told the story of a guy who found a pangolin in the street, who'd been run over, and he, nursed it back to health and went and got it back reintroduced it to its natural environment. And by telling the story of that one individual pangolin, we learn about pangolins. Why am I saying that? Well, I'm just so all me and Alexei can do here is tell our own story. And if that the insight that provides is the insight that provides.
Yeah. And I found you in the street and nursed you back down.
No, it was in a basket in the reeds of a river. But this website, syria.liveuamap.com. Again, so if I could just finish, so the top right is yellow for the SDF. The bottom left of Syria is mostly green for the Free Syrian Army, who they are, I think,
They're backed by Turkey, are they?
They're Turkey backed,
Yeah.
but again, even that kind of irks me to say that, because I think firstly they are Syrians and who have fucking liberated their country, and then when
some of them are Turkmen to Syrians, aren't they? So they have they have an allegiance both with Turkey and with Syria, I think.
And then the very bottom left of the map is blue because it's the Golan Heights, which is occupied by Israel at the moment as their lovely little buffer zone. And it's the blue bit is poking out a bit where it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
and that's because they have sent some foot soldiers in. And now all over this map, there are little icons. Some of the icons have guns. Some of the icons have a little mushroom cloud or a bomb falling from the sky or a megaphone. And there's tank icons, and you can click on these icons, and the icons are different colors, the colors of the different factions. And so this is like a really fucking wicked, up-to-date source of information, because you can go to any region, click on an icon, and it will say like protests breaking. So let me click on this one here. There's a gun icon in the north on the border of the yellow and the green zone, and it says SDF fight. You click it, goes to a news story. SDF fighters are engaged in heavy clashes with Turkish-backed forces near the Karakozak Bridge, Kobani and Tishin Dam. So it's giving you up-to-date updates on how this.
So
this
they're trying to. They are fighting with the Kurds,
But it's thankfully not too many icons. The most icons I can see are blue bomb icons because Israel's bombing the shit out of different parts of Syria. But as soon as it started happening, what really pissed me off was people starting to say, "Oh no, they're Israeli. The Israeli funded these fighters. Oh, they're all ISIS. They're all ISIS. No, the Turks have just done this. They've caused this to help them defeat the Kurds and like blah blah blah." And they're not giving Syrians the credit or celebrating on behalf of Syrians for what a monumental thing this is. My cousin, for the first time, has been able to visit Damascus, and I've seen videos sent to my phone, of my cousins hugging for the first time in over 20 years, and not seeing each other, siblings and cousins, uncles, like in bewilderment and shock that they're standing in front of someone who they've only been able to look at through a screen. For 20 plus years. This cousin of mine, he basically had to flee Damascus, and he was living in between Aleppo and America because he was against the government. And he has an amazing charity. It's called Aid All Syrians. If you want to help out any Syrians, he has a compound in Syria, aidallsyrians.org. They provide housing to families and disabled and injured members of the public, and they provide health and education services. And they also, unlike most charities, they have no middleman. None of the money you donate goes towards marketing or salaries. He puts everything into this charity, and everything you give goes straight to helping people out. aidallsyrians.org. This is my cousin's charity, and I'm really proud of him and everything they do there. But he's had that compound in Syria for years and years. And
it's funny that he could still keep it going, yet be opposed to government, because it wasn't in like a rebel-held area. It would still be in a government control. I mean, it would be in Syria.
It was on the border with Turkey.
Oh, right.
And so
you got a degree of latitude there.
Yeah, and a bit of protection. And, anyway, just like, So he's been able to visit Damascus and visit family, and this is happening all over the country. And people
I hope it continues.
Are coming out of their prison cells where they've been locked up for decades. And that was a moment of profound beauty and excitement for Syrians. And then like people just instantly saying, no, it's just an Israeli thing or a Turkish thing. It's like, well, let them have a second. But what's happening?
Let's continues. We'll see.
And I hope they sell. So far, I do know they've brought in a transitional government. They've started to put that together. And by the looks of it, they are not using Islamists, and they're using actually qualified, interesting people. What they've got, their interim prime minister at the moment is an engineer whose specialty is rebuilding infrastructure.
Right.
And they've put him in, and from what I've seen, he's a decent dude. So there might be this fighting happening in the countryside over borders and who owns what region. Like, this is just a power grab at the moment. But that's in Damascus. I don't think that's really happening. I think people are working together and they have the interest of the whole country at heart.
Well, let's hope that continues.
Something I keep hearing is Syria now, Palestine next. This is Israel. If I could just finish one last thing. Israel are so scared. This is why they're bombing Syria. This is why they're bombing Syria's military posts and military bases. They're trying to cripple its military ability, because the last thing Israel wants in this world is a democratic Arab country. Because true democratic Arab country would be bad news for Israel. Because the only reason the Arabs haven't fucking crushed Israel from all sides is because they're all the leaders are corrupt, being paid off. Of course, Arabs want Palestine to be free. Of course, Arabs all around the world are furious at what Israel's doing and can see genocide happening before their eyes. But the leaders are just these corrupt pieces of shit, like any leader around the whole world. If we have a Keir Starmer who will kiss Israel's balls, why do you think any other country's leader wouldn't do the same thing? Arab or not, power breeds corruption, money breeds corruption, and that's what's happening all of a sudden. A free Syria with a democratic government who hasn't been planted there by a Western power, which I'm sure they're trying to do, is the worst thing that could happen for Israel. And that's what we're all really hoping for, is that we end up with a real democracy there who are going to hold Israel to account.
Well, let's revisit that, shall we? I'm less optimistic than you, really. But
I'm not saying I'm optimistic. I'm saying what we're hoping for.
Well,
the last thing we should do is panic as well, though, because that's also what Israel want, is for Arabs to panic and to start scrambling. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, no, well, we'll see, really. I still think I'm still slightly appalled at how, well, no, I don't know. It's just, I'm slightly humbled by how incoherent are. I thought we'd be more authoritative. Well, you're more authoritative than me, really. You've got more to say.
Well, I'm looking at a map with dots on it, but it's not. It's not about authority. It's about passion, and we're not. Yeah, we're not here. We're not a news source. We're not a news source. Are we?
We'll keep an eye on this. There was a very interesting guy called Alistair Crook, whose name I've heard before. I saw he did a long interview with Chris Hedges. And I mean, one of the interesting points, he's obviously very well informed about the region, but also one of the, interesting point he made was that Israel is kind of like a Ponzi scheme. And, a Ponzi scheme is this sort of scheme where, you promise massive rewards, 11% interest on your investment. And what they do is, in a Ponzi scheme, they use the money from investors to pay off other investors, pay off. So it can only keep going as long as more and more people invest, because, ultimately they always collapse, really, but he sort of said that Israel is a kind of Ponzi scheme in a way that it has to keep finding new wars and new conflicts, because as soon as they run out of wars, that Israel will collapse. I thought that was a really kind of interesting metaphor, really, that they have to keep their population and themselves distracted by, making new conflicts and by stealing more, everywhere. And once Israel is forced to confront the contradictions within its own society, then that, like a Ponzi scheme, which seems, to be an amazing, secure business, then it will collapse. I'm not entirely sure that's true, but I would like to believe it is true.
Well, it correlates with what happens. Like, that's the only time they get invested in. Like, people donate. When they're in a war, that's when America ups their donations to Israel. That's when England donates stuff to Israel, because they are in crippling debt, Israel.
Yeah.
I've seen a report recently that they're in hundreds of billions of dollars of debt.
But they also don't have to face their own, the kind of insanity of what they are and where they are and who they are and what they, and the terrible, terrible, terrible things that they have been doing. As long as they can be immersed in this continuing crisis, then they, can distract themselves from their innate terribleness of their nation. So anyway, that's...
If I can make one last recommendation.
Yes.
So yeah, you don't come to Alexei and myself for news and information. You come to us for opinions and bullshit. But if you are on Instagram, there's a fella called Paul N. Mathis. Mathis is Mathis. Paul Nabil Mathis is his real name, but Paul N. Mathis is his handle. He's an American Syrian American who's been providing really, really great coverage of what's happening in Syria. He's where I learned about this website from and his analysis of what's going on. Just be careful who you're getting information from.
Yes,
I had people messaging me, like old friends of mine messaging me going, I've got a shame about Syria. I'm like, what? I'm like trying to celebrate. And he goes, yeah, it's all just Israel, isn't it? It's just Israel doing this, and all the rebels are backed by Israel. I'm like, wait. And I was just like, firstly, how dare you lecture a Syrian about what's going on in Syria? Because when I tried to argue with him, he started getting defensive and doubling down. I'm like, F off, mate. But also, like, these people who are liberating the country are not Israelis. They're not. They're Syrians doing something incredible. Those images of the prisoners coming out, wasn't that incredible? Seeing them
moving, yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, well, let's
we'll keep an eye on it.
We'll keep our overview, Overwatch on it, and you'll hear it first here. Something.
I've had a lot of really, really... Shall we move on?
Yes, I think we have. I thought we'd do all Syria, but actually I think we should move on, yeah.
No. I've had I think any more talking we do on the topic will just be pulling some stuff out of our butts. Lots of really nice comments about the film club and our discussion on With Nail. I think it was successful despite your existential panic attack halfway through it, where you were wondering what the point or what happens next.
I feel that about everything, but yeah.
And someone, Mark, messaged on the Patreon community chat to answer Alexei's questions of what happens now with Film Club. Now that the podcast is recorded after we watch the film, the way you could put our thoughts and questions. He's saying, could you do the podcast after we've had a chance to watch it and send you questions, basically? And I thought that's kind of what the point was. That's why we were telling listeners. That's why we're telling you what we're going to watch so that you can watch it. But I guess we're not giving them a specific date. So next time I'm going to tell you a deadline to send us messages and ask us questions and
big
emails.
News, Talal. Big news.
What's that?
I have decided on the next film.
No way.
I fucking have, man.
Is it The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover?
No, it isn't.
Someone suggested.
Oh, fuck no. I remember going for an audition with Peter Greenaway. Never have two people not got on more.
Oh, really?
For that film, actually. Yeah, he saw me. We had a meeting for that film, and I'm like...
Would you have been... Were you auditioning for Gambon's part?
No, I think the next one down, the driver... I think, I can't remember, but I was like, mate, this is terrible. Although when I think about it, I've had many auditions or interviews, as we call them now, where like that. I'll tell everybody sometime about how I sort of brought the death of David Lean even closer.
The fuck? Okay, so we're not doing that. So I can't believe you've picked the next film.
Yes, I have picked the next film. This film is Broadcast News. Do you know what that is?
Hey, that rings a bell.
You're looking at
Broadcast News. That's not the We're Angry as Hell, I'm not going to take it anymore.
No, that's Network.
That's network.
No, it's a film. It's a film that I've always loved, but I haven't watched for a few years. But I also think it's. I was talking to had a meeting with my editor, my book editor, the other day, and I, for some reason, started talking about broadcast news, and I realised this is the film I want to see next with all my internet friends, who are my best friends, really.
Also from 1987.
1987. Okay, same years with that.
Yeah, American film. Holly Hunter, William Hurt, Albert Brooks, even a bit of Jack Nicholson in there.
Yeah.
And John Cusack.
Yeah, both Cusacks.
I love John Cusack.
He's got a bit weird now. He's had a bit of plastic surgery, I think.
Don't you dare say a bad word about him.
I'm afraid he has.
He's very pro-Palestinian.
I know he is.
Lost a lot of work because of it.
Yeah. Anyway, this film, I think this film works on so many. I hope it does on rewatching. It works on so many different. It's a funny film. It's a romantic comedy. Mm-hmm. It's very touching in the romance because it's about a kind of. It throws a very interesting light on, very sophisticated, interesting light on friendship and desire and love, and so it's very interesting in that department. But it's also, more importantly, it's about a kind of pivotal moment, really, and it was prescient in this way. It's about the moment when the news changes from being the news to being entertainment. Really.
Yes.
When it's about the chipping away, and I don't think it. I mean, to where we are now, where the news is entirely unreliable and is entirely false and is entirely a kind of
especially in America,
particularly in the United States. Yeah, I mean, I think there was always, to a degree, there was always that, but there was a much more. There were the resources and there's the impetus to at least try and tell a kind of truth. And then this is about that moment when that battle is lost, really. And it's, it's very profound for a romantic comedy to also be about that. It also has one of the greatest sort of anxiety attack scenes in it I've ever.
Wow. That's also the
ever
theme
seen,
of,
if you like that.
It's also the theme of Anchorman with Will Ferrell, is about that when news became entertainment. It's about that moment.
Yeah, I mean, Anchorman is a good film, but it's it's not. Yeah.
So, when was the last time you watched broadcast news?
Probably many years ago. Long time.
Okay.
But also, I mean, it's always somebody. I worked with William Hurt, so there's always somebody in these films that I worked with.
Mm-hmm. What did he work with Willie Hurt on?
Gorky Park, my first movie.
Porky Pig. Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've yet to watch that. We need. I've yet to watch.
Well, I don't know. We could have a thread.
Gorky
I mean,
Park.
I love talking about all. I was talking last night. I was at a party at the. There was the radio. It was BBC Studios comedy. BBC Studios audio comedy party last night, which used to be the old Radio 4 comedy party. There's lots of young comics there, and some of the older brigade are also there. And I was talking to Emma Siddy. Now, Emma Siddy is a very nice, youngish sort of comedian, comic actor who I did Richard Osman's House of Games with.
Oh yeah,
and we became so close just over that day, really. And we were both talking about how much we love Anthony Costa out of Blue. He's so funny. He's such a funny guy, and really, I mean, funnier than he knows. Really, as Emma was saying, she could do very good impressions of him. And I actually watched that boy band documentary, 3 or 4 boy bands forever, just so I could see Anthony Costa out of Blue being interviewed. That's a slight detour, but he's a really nice guy. And but I was talking about, a thing I like to talk about, it's all the terrible films I've been in, really.
You talked to Emma Siddy.
Hey?
And so you were talking to Emma Siddy
I was telling Emma Siddy about all the terrible films I've been in. And the feminist remake of the Bride of Frankenstein starring Sting.
Oh, I really want to watch that.
A bit. Yeah, but I don't think we should use our film club to watch terrible films. I've been eating. And actually, also dear friend of mine, Phil Ellis, was saying that there was also a terrible film I did called Solar Babies, but that's become something of a. He said there's a podcast called maybe Screen Grab. I'm not sure. And they did a whole episode devoted to this terrible film I was in called Solar Babies, and they actually said I was good in it. But anyway, I don't know. But I think we should just stick to movies I'm not in. Movies I'm not in, but where I've worked with somebody in the movie.
Okay. But maybe I'll get round to watching these films that you're in, and then I can pick your brains and ask you about the film and stories from the production.
Yeah.
And you were at this party because you just wrapped Sandwich Bar.
Thank you for
season 5.
It's scheduled not to go out until 5th of March. Although I think they're going to put all 4 episodes on BBC Sounds at the same point. It's. I think it's. I'll keep plugging it actually because I would like maximum listenership.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I think, something really special. I was, it was hard to write in this particular, to capture the kind of zeitgeist really, which is not doesn't necessarily lend itself to audio comedy, but I think it's really powerful piece of work, I think, where genocide comes up a lot, which is unusual in in radio comedy. I mean, we've also, if the world changes radically, we've also got some space we may record some stuff closer to transmission. But it's really, it's a tough job writing 2 hours of top-notch comedy. I'm very, very proud of it anyway. And I think it will be, I hope when it goes out, we got record number of applications for tickets. They've never had so many applications for tickets. Yeah, 1,600 and 1,900 applications to see the show being recorded. Which is
I wish they would all
of.
listen to the bloody podcast as well.
Yeah,
that's some good
maybe
numbers.
They don't know about it. That's why I think they don't know. I think they're not being told about it.
We could just spend $1,000 on a marketing person for a month and get the word out.
We've been talking about that for 3 years.
That's great. And are you happy with the performance you gave, the delivery, the passion, the anger?
I mean, I haven't listened to the the recording yet, but the edit. But it felt great in the room. It felt really magical, and also, I mean, I wished in a way some of the bits. I did 5 nights of tryouts at the Museum of Comedy, and so the material is honed, but there is a thing with stand-up material where the more you perform it, you find new ways to deliver it and you add bits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, to a degree, five performances is not enough, to do that. But it is what it is. I mean, it's exceptional that anybody, Rich, the head of BBC Audio Comedy, was saying, it's unusual that a radio show, the people try the material out at all. Really, they just think of it and then do it. Right?
Just strange because before you go to Edinburgh, you do a couple of months of work in progress. Yeah. I've been doing the same stand-up material for like 6 years. And I'm still finding new ways and honing it and finding new joy. And just when I'm starting to get bored of the material, I find something new in it that makes me completely love it and look at it with a new angle.
Well, you do, I think. And it was slightly frustrating that I thought, as I was doing some of the bits in Sandwich Bar, I thought, there is potentially a lot more in this bit, really. I can always do it live and work it and stuff.
This is why people want you to tour again, because that's it, isn't it?
No.
You can use this material from Sandwich Bar and keep gigging it and
absolutely.
and evolving it, finding new threads in it.
It's just that traveling. The days are lost. You can't. You always think, you're in Nottingham. You think, I'll go and see, Nottingham, the Museum of Pencils or whatever that they have in Nottingham. But you don't. You just lie in your hotel room until they throw you out, really. And then you do the gig that night, and you come alive briefly on stage for an hour and a half, and then you're back in that kind of. You're back in that coma, really. And that when you're young, I think, well, one, you have more energy, but also it doesn't. But when you're my age, you sort of think you don't want to lose those days. In a sense, it's you haven't got so many days left that you can afford to just waste a day lying on the bed in a Marriott in Dundee.
That's why you need me with you. I'll wake you up at the crack of dawn. We'll go out with a camera.
Yeah,
and we'll
going to do Kung Fu. We're going to do Kung Fu.
Do Kung Fu in the park. We'll film some fun YouTube content. Go for a run or something I've never done. And go check out some museums.
Yeah.
I'll be like a little mini you.
Yeah. I wonder if if I push whether I could be that person, or whether the show would just be shit because I was knackered. I
wonder.
Yeah,
it's one way to find out.
Mm.
All right, so broadcast news.
Yes, that's the film.
The first podcast of January, we will be watching broadcast news. If you want to get involved in the film club, you've got until then to watch it and send us questions and comments about broadcast news from 1987. There's nowhere, it doesn't look like there's anywhere to watch it for free or to stream it. So
I know where you can. There are places you can buy it.
Yes,
for streaming.
Places you can buy it, rent it, and you might want to call up a pirate friend of yours. However you want to do it, that's your business. Have you heard of John Pilger?
Yeah.
Australian filmmaker, documentarian.
Yeah.
John on our community chat messaged us about, or wrote in the community chat about John Pilger as an alternative Australian, because we were talking about Nick Cave. Last week, and he's like, well, there is an Australian that is very good, and it is his year anniversary since his passing.
Yes, some of the stuff Pilger did was amazing, although I do think in a way he did suffer to a degree from that kind of dictator blind. Other people can correct me on this, but I think he did suffer from a kind of a degree of left-wing dictator dysphasia or whatever, like dictator blindness, that he sometimes couldn't. He was so committed, committed to the truth, and committed to the rightness of our cause that sometimes he couldn't see. Maybe that's unfair, but people want to defend him. I slightly got that feeling sometimes that he was blind to the faults.
I think that's a condition of Westerners who look over into the Middle East, and. Yeah, because John Pilger, he did films about Palestine and stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Entirely, righteous. He's a righteous dude. I shouldn't. In a sense, you see, maybe I'm wrong for criticizing his kind of dictator bias. I'm, serving by equivocating. I'm serving the darkness. I'm serving the dark side by equivocating about somebody like Pilger, by bringing this issue up. But I don't know. Again, discuss, really.
I remember when Bashar first came into power after his dad died. I was very confused about how a president's son can take his place, because it's not a royal family. It's a president.
No.
But I do remember this kind of sympathetic story about him, and how people had this spin on him as a sympathetic character, because I think they called him like the parachute president, because it was meant to be his older brother who
Basil.
Was it Basil? Yeah.
Basil.
It's meant to be his older brother who became president next. He was the army guy. He was the military tough guy. But he died.
Died in a car crash, I think, although now you make me wonder.
And Bashar was in Acton and living in London.
Yeah.
He was an eye doctor.
Yeah.
And he married this woman from Acton, who was born here with Syrian parents. Who my family fucking knew her. She went to my Arabic school, my mum's Arabic school on Saturdays. My mum taught her how to speak Arabic and stuff. And her house in Acton, I remember you'd drive past it and it'd be covered in her family home, like covered in paint and like the windows have been bricked and shit. And so it's just been cordoned off and they're in like protection or something. But yeah, Bashar just suddenly snatched away from his life, parachuted into Damascus, now is the president of Syria. And people were like, oh, wow, what poor guy. Or like, he didn't mean to be there. And he had this kind of benefit of the doubt for the first few years.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, yes. I mean, but clearly he's done, terrible things. I mean, I think he had an opportunity. I mean, I think when I was watching Richard Medes and David Miller, they were kind of cynical about anything to do with the Arab Spring in a way. But I do think the uprisings in Derar in 2010, 2011 were real. I think that there was a moment when there was a popular uprising, as there was in Tunisia and Egypt.
Of course there was, yes.
Yeah, there was a popular uprising.
We were so hopeful. It was a really exciting time. It's such a weird feeling that the excitement that has come on Sunday when Bashar's finally ousted is something that began 11 years ago. And it's almost like our emotions were just, there was a pause button pressed.
Well, and of course, people of Egypt or the people of Tunisia have not had, what has come after the Arab Spring has been worse than what came before in many ways, certainly in Egypt.
Yes,
but
true.
He had that opportunity to deal with the uprising. I think if he'd maybe, I don't know, but conceded, to a degree of democracy, a degree of kindness, then Syria wouldn't have collapsed. I mean, and then bad faith actors, the Turks, the Israelis, the Americans, the Iranians,
Russians.
Then the Russians, then all piled in. But, there was a moment perhaps when he could have shown some kindness. And it seemed like, in a way, that the actions of a weak man to crack down so
disgusting,
mercilessly,
Whether you're right or wrong, as soon as thousands of your people are dying and being killed, you need to just step back and say,
and he didn't do that. And I wonder whether that was not that any of the other Arab leaders did anything different, but I mean, I don't know. There seemed like there was an opportunity, particularly in, say, after Derar. I don't know. But
do you know much about what's happening with the Observer?
Not a huge amount. They're being bought by Tortoise Media, which Linda said the people she follows on the internet say is basically the CIA. I mean, the Observer was always more right-wing, even when it was allied to the Guardian, than the Guardian itself, but which is not saying much. But I don't know, Jay Rayner has left in a huff, but he's a fucking prick anyway. But apart from that, no.
They're like picketing or something.
The Guardian staff are not.
They don't want it to be sold.
No.
Interesting. It's funny you said Tortoise Media. That podcast I mentioned earlier about animals, the Animal Sense Maker, is by Tortoise.
Really?
I had no idea that
it's all connected.
Big thing. That's so weird that you said that.
Yeah, it was. I think it was founded by a former Times journalist, but I don't know whether. I think the people, as I say, the people Linda listens to on the internet say the funding is suspicious.
Here's what they have to say. Tortoise is an audio-first newsroom devoted to slow news based in London, UK. We take news slowly. We investigate, we tell stories that really matter, and we take time to see the full picture.
And who are the people? James Hardcastle, isn't it? Is the sort of guy who founded it. Did I make that up?
Looking into it. Well, maybe that's a topic for next week. I'll do some research and we'll chat about that next week. Tortoise. And they're trying to buy the Observer, or they have bought the Observer.
They have bought the Observer, I think. What anybody wants with a newspaper these days is, in a sense, hard to fathom. But
especially just the Sunday edition of it.
Yeah.
It's confusing to me. But
yeah, I used to have a column in this. I had a column for years in the.
Where didn't you have a column, Alexei?
Virtually nowhere. Jewish Chronicle, I don't think I ever had a column there. Yeah, it's funny because it was sort of in the era also when, nobody could complain really because, so you felt like you wrote these things and that was kind of it really. But now, I don't know, to be a columnist now, it seems to be a very different thing. I don't know. Yeah, Sunday Mirror, Observer, Independent for many years. I just said we got Andrew Feinstein coming on Friday, so we'll record that and then we'll put
next episode is with Feinstein.
Yeah, also, I mean we may half yammering, half Feinstein, or Feinstein. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll find out.
Feinstein out. Yes.
I was going to ask you about Jonathan Friedland. I was just looking up his name.
Git.
Yeah, Git. What's the story there?
He's a liberal Zionist. He's credited with really. Certainly, with the Guardian did a lot to subvert Corbyn. When Kath Viner was elected, became editor, there was some hope for her because she'd written that play, My Name is Rachel Corrie, about the woman killed by the Israeli by the IDF,
run over by the bulldozer.
Yeah. But she seemed to. I mean, in all fairness, the Guardian's coverage of Gaza hasn't been bad compared to the rest of the British media. But although it's, that's tailing off now. But Friedland is credited with really kind of making her anti-Corbyn, or making the paper anti-Corbyn.
Right.
And also showing a degree of support for Israel, which parts of it does. He certainly does. He's
Well, I mentioned him last week. I went to see my friend's show that I plugged on the podcast, Cutting the Tightrope, at the Arcola Theatre.
Right.
And they had it was lots of short plays about censorship in the arts, particularly around Palestine and Gaza. And they had a very great satirical piece about
him.
About not Jonathan Friedland, but someone who's obviously it was a satire of him.
No, he's a fucker.
And it was really, really interesting and well done. And the performance was fantastic. And a big part of the message of the play is that Arts Council have not been funding projects that are deemed political. And the only things that they are not funding is pro-Palestine stuff.
Yeah.
Since when is art not political? They've literally got it in their rules now. They've rewritten the rules for application is that you shouldn't be doing anything political to get Arts Council funding.
Yeah, again, I have mixed feelings about that in a way. I mean, one of my drive when I invented alternative comedy, one of the things I wanted it to be was absolutely free from state sponsorship of the arts, because I think that is a kind of a double-edged sword. I thought it was vital that I did stuff that was as political as could be, but people still paid to see it. And I thought that was a lot better than if I'm trying to raise funding from some fucker.
That's really interesting. Hey, I want to ask you about that next time we yammer.
Yeah, well, let's discuss that. I mean, I've always been absolutely against state sponsorship of the arts, and certainly, I think that. I mean, it's clearly fucked up, and. And
who was that geezer at the time where the comic strip first did their shows? The King of Soho guy.
Raymond, I've forgotten his name. Paul Raymond.
And his Leisure Lounge or something, or his Pleasure Lounge? Is that the venue?
No, Paul Raymond's Festival of Erotica was where the comic
That's
strip
it.
was
Someone
based.
was telling me, someone had been reading about him, and when people in suits showed up at the door, he'd be like, "This way for the Festival of Erotica." And then
that's me. That's what I said.
Oh, was that you? And
Yeah,
if a punk showed up, then you'd gesture the other way and go, "Oh, this way for the comedy."
Well, the bouncer said if they smelt of beer, if they smelt of aftershave, we'd send them to the Festival of Erotica. if they smelt of beer, we'd send them to you. But they also said that they would always, anybody Japanese was forced to go and see the Festival of Erotica. And one night, Ryuichi Sakamoto, composer of avant-garde musician and composer of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is perhaps his best known music, but haunting. They sent him into the Festival of Erotica. They're like, no, mate, you don't want to go. He wants to go to the comedy strip. He wants to come and see me, Rick. No, mate, you don't want to go there. You want to go to the Festival of Erotica.
You're pulling him either way, one of you on each arm.
No. So the bouncer just stuffed him into the Festival of Erotica, which was neither a festival nor particularly erotic. Really.
Okay, I'd love to ask you more about that whole era and government backing the arts.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I've always felt very. I mean, that's why I did what I did and became a popular entertainer.
Next time I'll ask you next time. I'm going to make a note of the hanging fruits, and we'll pick them up next time. Okay, we've run out of time, Alexei.
All right, but I want to.
No, enough. I need to plug the Patreon. All right.
All right.
I forgot to plug it earlier. Patreon.com/AlexeiSaylepodcast. Please support the show. Our patrons are growing. I'm so glad. This is one of the good things since we started doing it weekly.
Yeah.
Is that we have been growing. We've gone up 17 members.
Yeah.
In the last month. We now have 285 members.
That's good.
On the Patreon. There is a community chat room there. You can send me messages directly. I love you. Patreon.com/AlexeiSaylepodcast. Support the show. Buy us a coffee a month. That's it. And you can help keep the show going and keep it regular. 20 new people in the last month, actually, because 8 of them upgraded from free membership to a paid membership. Lovely. Once we reach 500 members, we're going to do a live streamed episode.
Fucking right.
And bring you guys. You can message me if you want to join the stream and ask Alexei a question in person or just chat with us for 5 minutes. We'll bring you into the stream. It will be crazy. Maybe we'll have surprise guests in it. We don't know.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. I've done the plugs.
All right. Well,
you can talk now, Alexei. You're allowed to talk again.
Well, no, I was just going to say bye-bye. That's long enough, isn't it? Hey?
Go on then.
Bye-bye. Masalam.
Masalam. Free Syria. Palestine next.
All right. Yallah. You've been listening to the Alexei Sale podcast. This show is produced and edited by Talal Karkuti. Music by Tarbush Records. Thanks to Audio Boom for hosting us. Please keep your emails coming in at alexeisalepodcast@gmail.com. Goodbye.